White man targeted black triplets. Minutes later, their CO dad grounded the flight. Get these ghetto kids out of first class right now. The man's voice boomed through the cabin of United Flight 3892, his face twisted with rage as he jabbed his finger toward 3 12-year-old black girls sitting quietly in row 2. I paid $6,000 for these seats, and I'm not sitting anywhere near them. The triplets, Zoe, Chloe, and Maya Richardson, froze mid-conversation, their excitement about visiting their cousins in Miami evaporating instantly. They'd been giggling about swimming pools and late-night movies just seconds ago. Now every passenger in first class was staring at them like they'd committed a crime. The man stood in the aisle, blocking other passengers trying to board, his expensive suit and Rolex watch screaming money and entitlement. His carry-on bag sat at his feet, forgotten, as he glared at the flight attendant rushing toward the commotion. "Sir, please lower your voice and take your seat," the flight attendant, a young woman named Jennifer, said firmly but politely. "I will not sit down until you remove these children." He gestured wildly at the triplets. "Look at them. They obviously don't belong in first class. Their tickets are probably fake, or stolen, or bought with drug money. I want them moved to the economy where they belong." Zoe, the boldest of the three, held up her boarding pass with trembling hands. "Sir, we have tickets. Our dad bought them for us." "Your dad?" The man laughed, cruel and mocking. "Sure he did, sweetheart. Let me guess, he's a rapper or a drug dealer. Because that's the only way people like you can afford first class." Maya, the most sensitive, felt tears burning behind her eyes. Chloe grabbed both her sister's hands, squeezing tight, trying to be brave even though her own hands were shaking. Other passengers pulled out phones, some recording, some texting, but nobody spoke up. Nobody defended them. The silence was almost worse than the man's words. "Sir, I need to see your boarding pass," Jennifer said, her professional smile straining. "And I need you to stop harassing these passengers." "Harassing?" His voice rose even higher. "I'm the one being harassed. I have rights. I have elite status with this airline. And I'm telling you right now, either they go, or I'm calling my lawyer and suing United for everything they're worth." He pulled out his phone, already dialing, already escalating, already so sure that his anger and his money and his whiteness would win this fight. What he didn't know, what he couldn't possibly know as he stood there threatening 3 terrified 12-year-old girls, was that their father, Marcus Richardson, was watching everything unfold in real time. Because United Flight 3892 was equipped with live cabin surveillance that fed directly to the operations center. And Marcus Richardson wasn't just any father. He was the CEO of United Airlines. And in exactly 90 seconds, this man's entire world was about to come crashing down in ways he couldn't begin to imagine. Now let me ask you something real. Have you ever watched a grown man bully children and wondered why nobody stopped him? Have you ever been in a situation where someone with power abused it, and everyone around just pulled out their phones instead of using their courage? If you think racism against children is something we should just ignore, if you believe staying silent is safer than speaking up, then go ahead and click away. But if you know in your soul that what's happening to Zoe, Chloe, and Maya is exactly the kind of evil we need to stand against, if you understand that your silence makes you complicit, then you need to stay until the very end of this story. Because what their father is about to do will shock you. Drop your experiences in the comments. Where and when have you witnessed this kind of hatred? Hit that like button if you stand against racial discrimination, share this video so the world can see, and subscribe to Hyper Racism channel because what happens in the next 90 seconds will restore your faith that sometimes justice comes swift and devastating. The Richardson triplets had been counting down to this day for 3 months. Zoe, Chloe, and Maya, identical in appearance but completely different in personality, had circled June 15th on their bedroom calendar in bright red marker. Summer vacation. 2 weeks in Miami with their cousins. Freedom from homework and early mornings, and the pressure of being the only black student in their grade at Riverside Preparatory Academy in Chicago. Marcus Richardson had booked their first-class tickets back in March, wanting his daughter's first solo flight to be special, comfortable, memorable for all the right reasons. He'd gone over the travel checklist with them a dozen times. Boarding passes in the front pocket. Emergency contacts programmed in their phones. Stay together. Be polite to flight attendants. Call as soon as you land. Their mother, Dr. Maya Richardson, a cardiothoracic surgeon at Northwestern Memorial Hospital, had packed their bags with military precision, sunscreen, appropriate clothes, spending money, and enough snacks to feed a small army. She'd kissed each daughter goodbye that morning at O'Hare, fighting back tears because her babies were growing up too fast. Take care of each other, Simone had said, smoothing down Maya's braids one last time. And remember, you belong anywhere you choose to be. Don't let anyone make you feel otherwise. The girls had rolled their eyes good-naturedly. Mom always said stuff like that. They were 12, not babies. They knew how to handle themselves. Except now, sitting in seats 2A, 2B, and 2C aboard United Flight 3892, with a red-faced white man screaming at them like they were criminals, Zoe wasn't so sure they knew how to handle this at all. The man, his boarding pass would later identify him as Douglas Thornton, a real estate developer from Chicago's Gold Coast, continued his tirade even as other passengers squeezed past him to reach their seats. His face had gone from red to purple, veins bulging in his neck as Jennifer, the flight attendant, tried desperately to de-escalate. Sir, these young ladies have valid first-class tickets. I've scanned them myself. They have every right to be here. I don't care what your scanner says. Douglas's spit flew as he shouted. Look at them. They're 12 years old. What 12-year-old flies first class unless someone's running a scam? This is identity theft. This is fraud. And you're just going to let it happen? Zoe wanted to tell him that their dad was Marcus Richardson, CEO of the very airline he was currently disrupting. She wanted to see his face when he realized exactly who he was messing with. But her father had always taught them to stay humble, to never use his position as a weapon or a shield. Your character should speak for itself, he'd say. Not my job title. So Zoe stayed quiet, even though her heart was racing, even though she could feel Chloe's nails digging into her palm, even though Maya had started crying silently, tears streaming down her face. The first-class cabin of the Boeing 787 was designed for luxury, leather seats that reclined into beds, personal entertainment screens, and ambient lighting that shifted from blue to purple. Gate 34 at O'Hare's Terminal 1 had been bustling with the usual pre-flight energy. Business travelers typing on laptops, families wrangling children, flight crew moving with practiced efficiency. But now everything had stopped. The boarding process had ground to a halt. Passengers in economy, still waiting to board, craned their necks to see what was causing the delay. The gate agent, a middle-aged black woman named Patricia, had abandoned her scanner and was rushing down the jetway to assist. Douglas Thornton didn't notice or didn't care. He was on his phone now, his voice carrying through the entire cabin. Yes, I need to speak to your supervisor immediately. I'm being forced to sit next to suspicious passengers, and your staff is doing nothing about it. Jennifer's composure was cracking. Sir, if you don't take your seat right now, you'll be removed from this aircraft. You'll remove me? Douglas laughed, incredulous. Do you know who I am? I'm Douglas Thornton. Thornton Properties owns half the commercial real estate in downtown Chicago. I've spent over $200,000 with United in the past 3 years alone. You're going to kick me off for complaining about obvious fraud. He turned back to the triplets, his eyes cold and calculating. Where are your parents? Who's traveling with you? We're traveling alone, Chloe said quietly, trying to sound brave. To visit our cousins. Alone. Douglas seized on that like a predator spotting weakness. See? Unaccompanied minors in first class? That's not protocol. That's not normal. Something is very wrong here, and everyone's too politically correct to admit it. Maya's crying had gotten louder, her small shoulders shaking. Zoe put her arm around her sister, whispering reassurances she didn't feel. This was supposed to be fun. This was supposed to be the best summer ever. What the girls didn't know, what Douglas Thornton definitely didn't know, was that 43 floors above them in United Airlines headquarters downtown, Marcus Richardson had been alerted the moment his daughter's names appeared on a passenger disturbance report. United's new AI-powered monitoring system, implemented just 6 months ago, flagged incidents involving minors in real time. When Jennifer had radioed for supervisor assistance, mentioning 3 12-year-old girls being harassed, the system had cross-referenced their names with employee family members. Marcus's phone had buzzed with an alert. Then his computer monitor lit up with live cabin footage from Flight 3892 security cameras. He'd been in the middle of a quarterly earnings call with the board of directors. 20 executives on video conference, discussing profit margins and route expansions and fuel costs. Marcus had glanced at his phone, seen his daughter's names, and felt his blood run cold. "Excuse me," he'd said, his voice tight. "I need to take this. Linda, continue without me." He'd muted the conference call and pulled up the cabin feed. The image quality was crystal clear, 4K resolution installed in all new aircraft, specifically for situations like this. And there on his screen, in real time, he watched a grown man terrorize his 12-year-old daughters. Watched Maya cry. Watched Zoe try to be strong. Watched Chloe's hands shake as she held her sisters. Watched dozens of passengers record on their phones, but not one person spoke up in their defense. Marcus Richardson had built his career on composure, on staying calm under pressure, on strategic thinking and measured responses. He'd risen through United's ranks over 20 years, from operations manager to executive vice president to CEO, specifically because he never let emotion override judgment. But watching his daughters being publicly humiliated, watching their tears, watching their fear, something primal and protective overrode every professional instinct. He picked up his direct line to flight operations. "This is Richardson. Ground Flight 3892 immediately. Pull it from the gate. Do not allow takeoff." "Sir?" The operations manager sounded confused. "That flight is scheduled to push back in 4 minutes. We have FAA clearance, weather is good. I don't care if the Pope himself is on that flight. Ground it. And get me Captain Williams on the line." His executive assistant, Rachel, appeared in his doorway, her face concerned. "Marcus, what's happening? Get legal on standby. Get PR on standby. And get me everything we have on passenger Douglas Thornton. Everything. Credit history, flight history, social media, and employment information. I want to know who he is and what leverage we have in the next 3 minutes." Rachel had worked for Marcus for 8 years. She'd never seen this look on his face, this cold, controlled fury that made her instinctively step back. Right away. Back on Flight 3892, Douglas was still ranting, still demanding, still absolutely convinced that his money and status would win this argument. He didn't notice Jennifer's earpiece light up. Didn't notice her expression change from stressed to shocked. Didn't notice the captain emerging from the cockpit with an unusual urgency in his step. Captain Robert Williams, a 25-year veteran pilot and one of Marcus's closest friends, had just received a call that made him almost drop his coffee. "Bob, it's Marcus. My daughters are on your flight. The triplets. And a passenger is harassing them. I need you to handle this. Now." The captain looked through the cockpit door into first class, saw the commotion, and saw 3 young black girls huddled together while a man gesticulated wildly. His jaw tightened. "Consider it handled." Douglas was mid-sentence, phone still pressed to his ear, when Captain Williams's voice came over the intercom. "Ladies and gentlemen, this is your captain speaking. We're experiencing a situation that requires us to return to the gate. Please remain seated. This will only take a moment." Douglas frowned, confused. "What? Why are we going back?" The plane began reversing, the jetway reconnecting with a mechanical thunk. And in his office downtown, Marcus Richardson was already walking toward the elevator, car keys in hand, his destination clear. He was going to O'Hare. He was going to Gate 34. And Douglas Thornton was about to learn exactly whose daughters he'd decided to terrorize. The plane jerked to a stop back at the gate, and confusion rippled through the cabin. Passengers in economy who'd just settled in for takeoff exchanged bewildered glances. Business travelers checked their watches, already calculating how this delay would affect their connections. But in first class, Douglas Thornton's confusion quickly morphed into vindication. "See." He turned to the passengers around him, gesturing triumphantly. "They're removing them. Finally, someone with sense is handling this situation. Zoe's stomach dropped. Were they really going to kick them off the plane? After everything? After having valid tickets? After doing nothing wrong? After enduring this man's abuse? Were they actually going to side with him? Girls, gather your things, Jennifer said quietly, approaching their row. Her expression was unreadable, professional mask firmly in place. Maya's crying intensified. But we didn't do anything wrong. I know, sweetie. Just trust me, okay? Jennifer's voice was gentle, which somehow made it worse. If she was being kind, it meant this was really happening. Chloe was already reaching for their carry-on bags, her movements mechanical, her face blank. Zoe recognized that look. It was how Chloe shut down when things got too overwhelming. Retreating into herself, going through the motions while her mind went somewhere safe. Douglas was practically glowing now. Thank you. Finally. Some common sense. I was starting to think this airline had completely lost its standards. Sir, you should gather your belongings as well, Captain Williams said, emerging from the cockpit. His tone was neutral, giving nothing away. Douglas blinked. What? Why would I gather my belongings? I'm not going anywhere. They're the ones with fake tickets. Our tickets aren't fake. Zoe finally snapped, her fear transforming into anger. She was tired of being quiet, tired of being polite, tired of letting this man talk about them like they were criminals. My dad bought them. We go to Riverside Prep. We have straight A's. We've never stolen anything in our lives. You don't know anything about us, but you just assumed. Zoe, Jennifer interrupted gently. Not now. Come with me, please. All three of you. The triplets stood, their legs unsteady, their faces burning with humiliation as they gathered their backpacks. Around them, phones were still recording, capturing every moment of their shame. This would be on social media within minutes. Their friends would see. Their classmates would see. Everyone would know they'd been kicked off a plane. Mom's going to be so upset, Maya whispered, wiping her eyes. Dad's going to be furious, Chloe added quietly. Douglas was smiling now, settling back into his seat 2D, stretching his legs out into the extra space. Much better. See how easy that was? Just enforce your own policies. That's all I was asking for. A woman across the aisle, who'd been silent throughout the entire confrontation, finally spoke up. That was disgusting. You should be ashamed of yourself. Douglas turned to her, his expression instantly hostile. Excuse me? I should be ashamed? For pointing out obvious fraud? For maintaining standards? Maybe you're okay with? Mr. Thornton. Captain Williams's voice cut through the argument like a knife. I need you to gather your belongings and deplane immediately. The cabin went silent. Even the rustling of bags stopped. Every eye turned toward Douglas, whose confident smile faltered. What did you just say? You're being removed from this aircraft. Please collect your belongings. Douglas's face cycled through emotions, confusion, disbelief, then rage. This is ridiculous. I'm not going anywhere. Those girls are the problem, not me. Mr. Thornton, you've disrupted this flight, harassed minor passengers, refused multiple requests to take your seat, and created an unsafe environment. You violate multiple FAA regulations and United Airlines customer conduct policy. I created an unsafe environment? Douglas was on his feet now, his voice rising to that dangerous pitch again. They're the ones who don't belong here. I was just pointing out the obvious. The obvious? Captain Williams took a step closer. The obvious that three well-dressed, polite children with valid first-class tickets somehow don't belong in first class? The obvious that you've spent the last 10 minutes berating 12-year-old girls and accusing them of crimes with zero evidence? That obvious. This is... Douglas sputtered, his carefully constructed arguments falling apart. You can't kick me off. Do you know how much money I spend with this airline? Do you know who I am? I know exactly who you are, Mr. Thornton. You're a passenger who's being removed for cause. Now you can either walk off this aircraft with dignity, or security will escort you off. Your choice. The triplets stood frozen in the aisle, their bags half gathered, trying to process what was happening. Jennifer gave them a small, reassuring smile. Girls, you can sit back down. You're not going anywhere. What? Zoe's voice came out as barely a whisper. Your seats are right there. 2A, 2B, and 2C. You're flying to Miami today as planned. Maya burst into fresh tears, but these were different. Relief flooded through all three sisters as they sank back into their seats, their legs suddenly too weak to hold them up. Douglas was apoplectic. This is discrimination. This is reverse racism. I'm the victim here. I'm being punished for speaking the truth. The truth. An older black man in seat 3C finally spoke up, his voice carrying the weight of years. Son, I've been flying since 1972. I was an Air Force pilot for 23 years. And I've heard men like you spout their truth my entire life. It's not the truth. It's bigotry dressed up in concerns about standards and protocol. And I'm glad to finally see consequences catch up with it. Other passengers began speaking up now, the dam broken. You were completely out of line. Those girls were so polite, and you attacked them for no reason. I'm glad they're throwing you off. Douglas looked around the cabin, seeing the hostility in faces that minutes ago had been silent witnesses. The phones that had recorded his righteousness were now recording his humiliation. You're all crazy. This is insane. I want to speak to whoever's in charge. I want to speak to the CEO of United Airlines. Marcus Richardson is going to hear about this. I'll have all your jobs. Captain Williams pulled out his phone, tapping the screen a few times. Funny you should mention that, Mr. Thornton. Mr. Richardson is already aware of the situation. In fact, he's the one who ordered me to remove you from this aircraft. Douglas's face went pale. What? Marcus Richardson, CEO of United Airlines. He saw the whole thing on our cabin monitoring system. Captain Williams held up his phone, showing the live feed. He watched you harass 3 12-year-old passengers. And he decided you're no longer welcome on United flights. But if this can't, Douglas's world was visibly crumbling. Being kicked off one flight was embarrassing. Being banned by the SEAL meant his elite status, his accumulated miles, his preferred seating, all of it gone. Jennifer leaned down to the triplets, her voice low. Girls, there's something you should know. Mr. Richardson didn't just see this because of the monitoring system. He saw it because she paused, smiling. Well, those are his daughters you were defending in there, Captain Williams. The captain's stern expression softened for just a moment. Actually, Jennifer, I think we should let Mr. Richardson explain that himself. He's on his way here now. Should arrive in about 15 minutes. Zoe felt her heart skip. Wait, Dad is coming here? To the airport? Left his office the moment he saw what was happening. He was in the middle of a board meeting. Chloe and Maya exchanged glances, and despite everything they'd just been through, despite the tears and fear and humiliation, all three sisters felt the same thing. Douglas Thornton had no idea what was about to hit him. Because their father didn't just have power. He had the kind of power that could ground flights, override pilots, and access live security feeds. The kind of power that came with running one of the largest airlines in the world. And he was on his way. Security officers appeared at the aircraft door, their presence making Douglas's removal imminent and inevitable. He grabbed for his phone one more time, his hands shaking. I'm calling my lawyer. This is wrongful termination of service. This is... Goodbye, Mr. Thornton, Captain Williams said firmly. As security led Douglas down the aisle, his protests echoing through the cabin, the other first-class passengers actually applauded. Some even stood up, their clapping filling the space where his hatred had been just moments before. The triplets sat in their seats, still processing, still trying to understand how this had flipped so completely. Around them, passengers offered smiles, thumbs up, even a few, "You girls okay?" check-ins that made Maya cry again, but this time from kindness, not cruelty. Jennifer crouched beside their row one more time. I'm so sorry you had to experience that. No one should ever be treated that way, especially children. Your father is going to want to talk to you when he gets here, but until then, can I get you anything? Drinks? Snacks? Anything at all? Is he really mad? Maya asked in a small voice. Dad, is he upset with us? Jennifer's expressions softened even more. Sweetie, he's not mad at you. He's furious at what was done to you. There's a big difference. Outside the aircraft, on the jetway, Douglas Thornton was still arguing with security, still insisting this was all a terrible mistake, still certain his money and status would fix this somehow. He had no idea that in 13 minutes, Marcus Richardson would walk through that terminal with the kind of quiet authority that made people instinctively step aside. He had no idea that his name was already being run through every legal database United had access to. He had no idea that his public tirade had been recorded not just by passengers, but by the airline's official systems, creating an ironclad paper trail. And he definitely had no idea that attacking Marcus Richardson's daughters was about to cost him far more than just one flight. Have you ever wondered what it feels like to be a child targeted by an adult's racism? To sit there powerless while someone twice your age and size attacks your character, questions your worth, and makes assumptions about your family based solely on your skin color? The triplets stayed calm. They were raised right, taught to be respectful even in the face of disrespect. But their composure only seemed to make Douglas angrier, more determined to prove they didn't belong. Why does black excellence, black politeness, black success make some people so uncomfortable? What is it about seeing black children in first-class seats that triggers such immediate, visceral hatred in people like Douglas Thornton? 13 minutes later, Marcus Richardson walked through Terminal 1 like a man on a mission. His suit was still perfect, his stride purposeful, but his eyes carried a storm that made travelers instinctively move out of his path. Behind him, his head of security and chief legal counsel struggled to keep up. Sir, we have Thornton's complete passenger history, his lawyer, David Chin, said, scrolling through a tablet. Multiple complaints have been filed against him over the years. Verbal altercations with staff. 3 incidents of racial profiling that were settled quietly with vouchers. Marcus's jaw tightened. Settled quietly. So we paid him to keep being racist. That was before your administration, sir. Previous management preferred to avoid public incidents. Well, that changes today. Marcus rounded the corner toward gate 34, and the gate agent Patricia spotted him immediately. Her eyes went wide. Mr. Richardson. Sir, I didn't realize. The girls, they're your? Where's Thornton? Patricia pointed toward a seating area where Douglas sat surrounded by security, still on his phone, still arguing. He's threatening lawsuits, sir. Says he's going to bankrupt the airline, ruin your reputation, destroy everyone involved. Marcus walked straight toward him. The security officers straightened instinctively, recognizing authority even if they didn't recognize his face. Douglas was mid-sentence with whoever he'd called, probably his lawyer, when Marcus's shadow fell across him. Mr. Thornton. I'm Marcus Richardson. Douglas looked up, his expression annoyed at the interruption. I don't care who you are. I'm in the middle of... He stopped. His eyes registered the name. Then his face went through a rapid transformation. Confusion, recognition, horror. Wait, Marcus Richardson? You're CEO of United Airlines. Yes. Marcus's voice was quiet, controlled, but there was steel underneath. I understand you wanted to speak with me. So here I am. Speak. Douglas's phone slipped from his hand, clattering on the floor. There's been a misunderstanding. Those girls, they were my daughters. Marcus let those 2 words hang in the air like an executioner's axe. Zoe, Chloe, and Maya Richardson. 12 years old. Straight A students at Riverside Prep. Flying first class on tickets I purchased for them to visit their cousins in Miami. My daughters, Mr. Thornton. The ones you called ghetto. The ones you accused of fraud, of theft, of being criminals. My daughters. The color drained from Douglas's face completely. His mouth opened and closed, but no words came out. You wanted to know how 12-year-olds afford first class? Marcus continued, his voice dropping even lower. Their father runs the airline. That's how. Any other questions about their legitimacy? About whether they belong? About what kind of money did they buy their tickets? Douglas finally found his voice, and it came out as a strangled whisper. I didn't know. I couldn't have known. If you just told me. If I'd told you? Marcus's expression hardened. So you only respect black children when you know their father has power? That's your defense? That if my daughters had been just regular black kids from a regular black family, your behavior would have been acceptable? No, that's not what I meant. You just what? Made assumptions based on their skin color? Decided that black children in first class must be criminals? Terrorized 3 12-year-olds because their presence offended you? Marcus leaned in closer. Let me be very clear, Mr. Thornton. You're not banned from one flight. You're banned from every United flight, every United partner airline, every code share we operate. Your elite status is revoked. Your miles are forfeited. And I'm personally going to make sure every airline CEO in America knows exactly why. Dad, Zoe looked up as he approached. Everyone's talking about it. It's everywhere. I know, sweetheart. People are saying mean things about that man. Really mean things. Marcus crouched beside their seats. People are telling the truth about what he did. That doesn't mean. That's accountability. Captain Williams approached with an update. Sir, Thornton's lawyer just withdrew the lawsuit. Apparently, his father called and threatened to cut him off completely if he didn't drop it. And Mr. Thornton Sr. just posted a statement disavowing his son's actions and apologizing to your family. What about Douglas? Last I heard, he's been suspended from Thornton Properties pending an internal review. His social media accounts are private now. He's deleted the post claiming he was assaulted, but screenshots are everywhere. He's trending #1 on Twitter, and it's not good for him. Marcus nodded slowly. Justice was swift when the truth was undeniable. When the evidence was overwhelming. When the power dynamics finally favored the victims instead of the perpetrators. But as he looked at his daughters, still shaken, still processing, still carrying trauma that videos and lawsuits couldn't erase, he wondered what came next. Douglas Thornton's life was imploding in real time. But what about the countless others like him? The ones who never got caught, never faced consequences, never had their racism exposed to millions? What about all the black children who experienced the same hatred but whose fathers didn't run airlines? That question would haunt Marcus long after Flight 3892 finally took off for Miami. Flight 3892 finally pushed back from the gate 2 hours behind schedule, but nobody complained. The mood in first class was almost celebratory, passengers still buzzing about what they'd witnessed. Several had already posted their own accounts on social media, praising Marcus Richardson for standing up for his daughters, for not letting corporate protocols override basic human decency. As the plane climbed to cruising altitude, Zoe finally worked up the courage to ask the question that had been gnawing at her. Dad, are you going to get in trouble for this? For grounding the flight and kicking him off? Marcus looked at his 3 daughters, their faces still carrying traces of tears, their eyes still holding shadows of fear. Sweetheart, sometimes doing the right thing costs something. But not doing it costs more. What if the board gets mad? Chloe asked quietly. What if they say you shouldn't have used your power like that? Then they can fire me. Marcus's voice was firm. I'd rather lose my job than fail to protect my children. Any job that requires me to stay silent while you're being terrorized isn't worth having. Maya leaned against his shoulder. But you love your job. I love you more. There's no contest. He kissed the top of her head. Besides, I didn't abuse my power. I used it exactly as it should be used, to enforce policies, maintain safety, and protect passengers from harassment. That's literally my job description. Captain Williams announced over the intercom. Ladies and gentlemen, I want to address what happened during boarding today. United Airlines has a zero-tolerance policy for discrimination, harassment, and abusive behavior toward any passenger, particularly minors. What you witnessed was that policy being enforced. Every passenger, regardless of age, race, or ticket class, deserves to travel with dignity and respect. On behalf of United Airlines, I apologize that today's incident occurred at all, and I thank those passengers who provided witness statements and video evidence. Your willingness to document injustice instead of ignoring it makes our skies safer for everyone. Applause broke out again. The older black veteran in 3C raised his glass of complimentary champagne toward Marcus. About damn time airlines started protecting us instead of placating racists. But while the atmosphere on the plane was one of vindication, outside the aircraft, Douglas Thornton's world was burning down spectacularly. By the time Flight 3892 reached Miami, Douglas had been fired from Thornton Properties. His father's public statement was brutal in its honesty. The actions of my son Douglas Thornton do not represent the values of this company or this family. His behavior toward children was reprehensible, and his subsequent attempts to portray himself as a victim compound the offense. Effective immediately, Douglas no longer holds any position with Thornton Properties. We are reviewing all projects he managed for potential discrimination issues, and we will be implementing mandatory anti-bias training for all employees. To the Richardson family, we extend our deepest apologies. The statement had over 3 million engagements within hours. Comments ranged from supportive to scathing, with many people sharing their own experiences of Douglas's racism over the years. Former employees came forward anonymously, describing a pattern of discriminatory behavior, refusing to rent properties to black tenants, making racist jokes in meetings, and expressing disgust at having to work with minority contractors. One woman, a former property manager named Jennifer Cole, posted a lengthy Twitter thread detailing how Douglas had fired her for renting a luxury condo to a black family. He literally said to me, "Those people bring down property values." When I reported it to HR, they paid me to sign an NDA and let me go. I've lived with that guilt for 5 years. Watching him finally face consequences feels like justice, but it came too late for too many people. Her thread went viral, adding fuel to an already raging fire. #Douglas Thornton is over party trended worldwide. His LinkedIn profile was flooded with comments. His business associates began distancing themselves publicly. 3 charities he'd been on the board of asked him to resign. But the most devastating blow came from his own daughter. Emily Thornton, a sophomore at Northwestern University, posted a video that made even seasoned internet users pause. "That's my father in those videos. Douglas Thornton. And I want everyone to know, I'm not surprised. This is who he's always been. He just usually did it in private. He made racist comments at dinner tables. He taught me to clutch my purse tighter around black people. He told me certain neighborhoods were dangerous, which was code for non-white. I was raised in his hatred, and I'm spending my adult life unlearning it. To those 3 girls he terrorized, I'm so sorry. You deserved better. You deserved kindness. And to my father, I hope this finally teaches you that your racism has consequences. I won't be visiting for Christmas." The video had 15 million views in 24 hours. Emily became a symbol of generational change, of children rejecting their parents' bigotry, of hope that maybe, just maybe, each generation could be better than the last. Douglas himself had gone completely silent. His social media accounts were deleted entirely. His phone number was changed. He'd essentially vanished from public life, the weight of global condemnation crushing whatever defiance he'd started with. Meanwhile, Marcus Richardson's approval rating soared. Passengers flooded United's customer service with messages of support. Bookings actually increased as people specifically chose United because of how the situation was handled. The board of directors, far from being angry, issued a statement backing Marcus completely and announcing new industry-leading anti-discrimination protocols. Under CEO Marcus Richardson's leadership, United Airlines reaffirms our commitment to protecting all passengers from discrimination and harassment. We will not tolerate racism in our terminals, our aircraft, or our corporate culture. Mr. Richardson's actions reflect the values we strive to embody: courage, integrity, and an unwavering commitment to human dignity. 3 days after the incident, Maya asked her father a question while they were swimming in their cousin's pool in Miami. "Dad, do you think that man learned anything? Do you think he'll be different now?" Marcus floated on his back, looking up at the cloudless Florida sky. "I don't know, baby girl. Some people learn from consequences. Some people just learn to hide their hatred better. But here's what I do know. Because his racism was exposed, because he faced real consequences, Every other Douglas Thornton out there just got a little more afraid to act on their prejudice. And maybe, just maybe, that fear will protect the next 3 12-year-old girls who just want to fly to visit their cousins in peace. Zoe swam over, treading water beside him. Do you think Mom would be proud? How do we handle it? Marcus smiled. Dr. Simone Richardson had called 17 times during the incident. Her surgery schedule was the only thing preventing her from leaving the hospital to get to her daughters. She'd cried when she finally video called them that evening, seeing they were safe but knowing they'd lost something. A certain innocence, a belief that being polite and following rules would protect them from racism. Your mother is incredibly proud. You stayed calm. You didn't fight back. You let the system work even when it seemed like it might fail you. That took courage. I was scared, Maya admitted quietly. Being scared doesn't mean you weren't brave, sweetheart. Bravery is being scared and still standing your ground. All 3 of you did that. Chloe, who'd been quiet most of the trip, finally spoke. Dad, I want to do something. About what happened. Don't just let it be a story people talk about for a week and forget. Marcus looked at his daughter, seeing something fierce and determined in her 12-year-old eyes. What did you have in mind? I want to talk about it. Maybe do interviews or write about it or I don't know, something. Because if it happened to us and we have you to protect us, what happens to kids who don't? What happens to Black kids whose parents can't ground flights or get CEOs on the phone? And in that moment, Marcus realized his daughters hadn't just survived racism. They were preparing to fight it. The question was the world ready for what they were about to say? Have you ever wondered why some people face consequences for racism while others never do? Why was Douglas Thornton's hatred finally exposed after years of complaints being buried? The difference wasn't that he was more racist than others. It was that this time, his targets had power. But what about all the times when victims don't have power, when there's no CEO father, no viral videos, no public outrage? Does justice only come when it's convenient, when it's captured on camera, when the victim has connections? Or should every person, regardless of who their parents are, be protected from the Douglas Thorntons of the world? 2 weeks after the incident, the Richardson family sat together in their living room in Chicago's Hyde Park neighborhood. The girls had returned from Miami sun-kissed and seemingly recovered, but Marcus and Simone both noticed the subtle changes. How Zoe checked over her shoulder more often in public spaces. How Maya went quiet when white strangers stood too close. How Chloe researched racism and discrimination obsessively, filling notebooks with statistics and case studies. They're processing, Dr. Simone told Marcus one night after the girls had gone to bed. Trauma doesn't just disappear because justice was served. They're learning a hard truth, that the world sees them differently than it sees their white classmates. That their skin color makes them targets, no matter how polite they are, how smart they are, how much money we have. Marcus had pulled her close, both of them grappling with the helpless rage that comes from being unable to protect their children from systemic hatred. I grounded that flight, got that man fired, and exposed his history. But I couldn't undo what he did to them. I couldn't erase those moments when they felt small and scared and powerless. Now, sitting in the living room with evening light filtering through the windows, the family was preparing for something they'd decided on together, a recorded interview about the incident. Multiple news outlets had requested them, but they'd chosen to do it independently, controlling their own narrative, speaking their own truth without edits or sound bites. Zoe adjusted the camera on the tripod they'd borrowed from their school's media lab. Chloe had written notes, organized thoughts, and prepared like she were defending a dissertation. Maya sat closest to their parents, still needing that physical proximity, that reassurance of safety. You girls sure you want to do this? Simone asked one more time. Once it's out there, you can't take it back. People will have opinions. Some will be supportive. Some will be cruel. We're sure, all 3 girls said in unison, that triplet synchronization that still amazed their parents. Zoe pressed record, and Chloe began speaking, her voice steady despite the slight tremor in her hands. My name is Chloe Richardson. These are my sisters, Zoe and Maya. We're 12 years old. 2 weeks ago, a man named Douglas Thornton screamed at us, called us criminals, and tried to get us kicked off a plane because we're Black. We want to talk about what that felt like and what needs to change so it doesn't keep happening to other kids. For the next 40 minutes, the triplets took turns sharing their experience. Not just the facts, those were already public, but the feelings. The fear twisted their stomachs when Douglas first started yelling. The confusion when other passengers just watched. The humiliation of thinking they were going to be removed for doing nothing wrong. The relief when their father's power intervened, mixed with the bitter knowledge that most black children don't have that protection. Maya, usually the quietest, spoke about the nightmares she'd had since. I dream that I'm on planes, and people are yelling at me, and Dad isn't there. Nobody's there. And I get smaller and smaller until I disappear. When I wake up, I have to remind myself I still exist, that I still matter, that one racist man's opinion doesn't define my worth. Zoe talked about the bystanders. There were maybe 40 people in first class who heard everything. 7 of them recorded it. But only one person spoke up before our dad arrived, that veteran in 3C. Everyone else just watched. They saw 3 kids being terrorized, and they chose to document it instead of stopping it. I don't know if that makes them accomplices or cowards or just scared, but I know it made us feel abandoned. Chloe, ever the researcher, brought receipts. We found out Douglas Thornton had harassed passengers of color for 8 years. 8 years. Multiple complaints. And United paid him off to keep quiet instead of banning him. So our trauma could have been prevented if the airline had acted on past complaints instead of protecting a racist customer because he spent a lot of money. That's not a system failure. That's a system working exactly as designed, protecting powerful white people at the expense of everyone else. Marcus watched his daughters transform their pain into advocacy, their trauma into truth-telling, and felt something break and rebuild in his chest. They were so young to carry this weight, so young to understand the mechanisms of oppression with such clarity. When they finished recording, Simone pulled all 3 girls into her arms. I'm so proud of you. So incredibly proud. You took something horrible and turned it into something powerful. Will it change anything? Maya asked, her voice small again. Or will people just watch the video and feel bad for a day and then forget? It was the question Marcus had been wrestling with since the incident. He'd used his power to deliver individual consequences. Douglas was fired, banned, publicly shamed. But the system that protected him for 8 years was still intact. The countless other Douglas Thorntons flying every day, harboring the same prejudices, just smart enough not to get caught on camera, they were still out there. Real change takes more than one viral moment, Marcus said carefully. But movements start with moments. Rosa Parks refused to move. Ruby Bridges was walking into that school. Every act of resistance, every refusal to accept injustice as normal, builds on what came before. Your video might inspire another family to speak up. It might make a bystander choose to intervene next time. Might convince an airline executive to actually enforce their anti-discrimination policies instead of just having them on paper. Or it might do nothing, Zoe said bluntly. People might just add it to the pile of racism stories they consume and do nothing about. Maybe, Marcus acknowledged. But you'll have done your part. You'll have told your truth. And that matters, even if the world doesn't immediately transform because of it. The video went live the next morning. Within hours, it had millions of views. News outlets picked it up. Civil rights organizations shared it. Schools announced they'd be using it in their curriculum to teach about modern racism and bystander intervention. But more importantly, it sparked conversations. Uncomfortable, necessary conversations in living rooms and classrooms, and corporate boardrooms across America. About the racism that children face. About the complicity of silence. About systems that protect perpetrators and abandon victims. About the difference between individual consequences and structural change. 3 airlines announced new policies directly inspired by the Richardson case. Passenger behavior tracking systems that banned repeat offenders, mandatory intervention training for flight crews, and victim advocate programs for passengers who experience discrimination. It wasn't enough. It would never be enough until the hatred itself was eradicated. But it was something. Seeds planted. Cracks in the foundation of accepted prejudice. A week after the video's release, Maya came home from school with a story. A white classmate had made a racist joke in the cafeteria. Usually, Maya said, everyone would have laughed nervously and moved on. But this time, 5 kids stood up and called it out. Told the kid it wasn't funny. Made him apologize. Created consequences. One of them said they saw our video. Maya told her family at dinner. Said it made them realize staying quiet makes them part of the problem. Simone reached across the table, squeezing her daughter's hand. That's 5 more allies than existed before. 5 more people who'll speak up next time. That's how change happens, baby. One person at a time, choosing courage over comfort. Marcus looked at his daughters, still children, healing, still carrying wounds that would probably never fully disappear, and realized they'd become something powerful. Not just victims who got justice. Not just kids who survived racism. But voices. Educators. Change agents. They'd taken the worst day of their young lives and transformed it into a teaching moment for millions. That didn't erase their trauma. Didn't make Douglas Thornton's actions okay. Didn't solve systemic racism or guarantee they'd never face discrimination again. But it meant their suffering wasn't meaningless. It meant something grew from the ashes of their humiliation. It meant the next 3 12-year-old black girls on a plane might have a few more allies, a few more witnesses willing to intervene, a few more systems designed to protect instead of abandon them. And maybe, just maybe, that was how you changed the world. Not with one dramatic moment, but with millions of small moments where people chose differently. Where bystanders became upstanders. Where silence became solidarity. Where individual courage accumulated into collective transformation. The Richardson triplets had sparked that change. Now they had to trust that the fire would keep spreading, one conversation, one policy, one intervention at a time. Because the fight against racism wasn't won in viral moments. It was won in daily choices, in persistent advocacy, in refusing to accept hatred as normal until, slowly, painfully, the world bent toward justice. 6 months after Flight 3892, 𝐒𝐿, Chloe, and Maya Richardson stood on stage at a National Youth Leadership Conference in Washington, D.C., addressing 2,000 students from across the country. They'd been invited to speak about advocacy, about using their voices, about transforming trauma into purpose. Maya, once the most timid, now spoke with quiet strength about the power of vulnerability. Chloe, the researcher, presented data showing measurable changes in airline discrimination policies since their story went viral. And 𝐒𝐿, the bold one, challenged the audience with a question that lingered in the air like smoke. What will you do the next time you witness injustice? Will you record it, or will you stop it? Their father watched from backstage, Simone beside him, both parents recognizing that their daughters had grown in ways that had nothing to do with age. They'd been forced to mature too quickly, to understand racism's mechanisms before they'd even finished middle school. But they'd chosen to turn that painful education into something meaningful. They're going to change the world, Simone whispered. Marcus nodded, his throat tight with emotion. They already have. Because the Richardson triplets had sparked something that continued to ripple outward. Airlines reported a 300% increase in passengers intervening when they witnessed discrimination. Bystander intervention training became standard in corporate America. Douglas Thornton became a cautionary tale, his name synonymous with the consequences of unchecked racism. But more than policy changes or corporate initiatives, something shifted in the culture. People started speaking up. Started refusing to let hatred go unchallenged. Started understanding that silence wasn't neutrality, it was complicity. The triplet story became a case study in how individual courage, institutional power, and public accountability could combine to create real change. Not a perfect change. Not a complete transformation. But measurable, meaningful progress. As the conference ended and the Richardson family prepared to return to Chicago, a young black girl approached them shyly. She couldn't have been more than 10 years old, her mother standing protectively behind her. I just wanted to say thank you, the girl said softly. Last week, a lady at the store followed me around like I was going to steal something. And I remembered your video. I didn't yell or cry. I just found the manager and told them what was happening. And they asked her to leave. The girl's eyes shone with pride. I stood up for myself because you showed me how. Maya hugged her, tears streaming down her face. Because that was the point of all of it. Not revenge against Douglas Thornton, not their father's power being flexed, not even the millions of views and the policy changes. It was about a 10-year-old girl learning she had value, had rights, had a voice worth using. That was justice. That was a change. That was hope. Now it's your turn to answer honestly. Do you think racial discrimination and prejudice can truly end, or will they always exist in some form? What do you believe needs to happen? In schools, workplaces, airports, stores, everywhere, to curb this poison that's infected our society for centuries? Do you think serving justice to individual racists like Douglas Thornton is enough? Or does the entire system need to be dismantled and rebuilt from the ground up? Tell us your opinion in the comments below because this conversation can't end here. And if you want racism to become a thing of the past in our country and world at large, if you want to be like Zoe, Chloe, Maya, and Marcus Richardson, educating others, raising awareness, refusing to stay silent when you witness injustice, then share this video with someone who needs to hear it and subscribe to this channel. Together, we can make sure stories like this lead to action, not just outrage. Together, we can create a world where 12-year-old girls can fly first class without being terrorized for the color of their skin. Together, we can be the generation that finally says enough is enough. Hit that like button if you stand against discrimination. Share your own experiences in the comments. When have you witnessed racism, and what did you do about it? What would you have done in the Richardson triplets' shoes? And most importantly, what will you do the next time you're a bystander to injustice? Thank you for watching. Thank you for caring. And thank you for being part of the solution. The Richardson family's story doesn't end here, and neither does ours. Subscribe to stay updated, and let's keep this conversation going until change isn't just a viral moment, but a permanent reality.